Welcome to Merge Plus Diversity and Inclusion Podcast, a podcast where business leaders come together to celebrate diversity and inclusion, as well as share their inspiring stories with the rest of the world.
Good afternoon, sir. I'd like to thank you especially for the honor of speaking with you today and to glean from your wealth of experience and wisdom. You're a veteran in our industry, a builder of businesses, developer of leaders. You've founded and grown several successful enterprises, right? You have developed and groomed and mentored leaders who are doing exceptional work in different areas of life and whose story will not be complete without you. You've given so freely of your experience and your knowledge through the several books that you have authored. I'm a proud owner of two of those books. You continue to work tirelessly to advance not just our industry, but to also build a talent pipeline and develop the next generation of leaders. You understand the need for capacity building, so much so that you have invested in advancing and ensuring the educational capacity of the younger generation. I'm glad I can personally say thank you today for the work that you have done and the work that you continue to do, not just for our industry, but for our nation. Through our conversation today, we will learn what role diversity has played in your business success. The idea is to be able to leave here with fresh insights and to learn what not to do if we want to build teams and companies and businesses that are sustainable. So again, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I'll dive straight into the question. We've been meaning to have your opinions and views.
Yes.
So diversity, and we don't just mean gender, we mean diversity in terms of age, culture, ethnicity, etc. in the workplace has been shown to improve overall business performance. Do you believe this is true? And how has this impacted the corporate performance of your businesses?
Thank you. First, I believe it is true. We just have to be very careful how we approach the question of diversity. There are those who insist that as an organization, you go out of your way. You go out of your way to seek diversity, even in some cases where you might compromise standards. My point of view has always been that a practice that enhances diversity is a practice that removes primordial biases. And I think that is the key. So if you operate a system that emphasizes quality, emphasizes all the good qualities you are looking for in an organization, in the absence of primordial biases, you have already taken care of this, which means you are hiring people without any bias about ethnicity. You are hiring the best you can find without any bias where the person comes from. You are hiring the best you can find from all cultures and the best you can find from across all genders. Now, when this happens, you end up with an organization that is really, really diversified, and yet you're hiring the best. And you will get the best performance from such organization. In my own case, I've seen this happen in organizations I've run. In the last organization when I was in Seplat, I didn't set out to say, I'm looking for a woman to hire. I'm looking for a qualified person to hire. And I find a woman that is qualified, I hire a woman. And in the end, even while then checking the where we were on the diversity profile of the company, we found out we had a leadership team of 8 members and myself as CEO. Okay, and of the 8 members, 3 initially were women. Not chosen because we're looking for women, but they're qualified, highly qualified people. In fact, today as we speak, the number 3 person in Seplat, the CFO, is a woman. When we hired her as GM Finance, we hired her for her competence, and she's demonstrated it and risen to be the CFO. Okay? The same thing with the legal director and so on. So because of the absence of any primordial biases, we've gone out to look for people, and we found people of all the elements that make up this diversity. And in the end, we've had a very diverse human resource base that has been very, very productive. It's the same thing. We started what we call the graduate training program. And the basic qualification was for you to have 2-1 and above. So we're looking for kids with 2-1 and first class. Went through a very rigorous process, purely based on merit. And in the end, you're hiring 35 young graduates, and half of them are women, qualified in their own rights. So if they start building a pipeline of people across, the age brackets, across diverse cultures, across genders, and you are building them up from the beginning, based on competence in the first place, that's the best thing that will happen to an organization.
Thank you
Yes.
very much. And I think I like your response because you focused on getting the basics right.
Yes.
Eliminating every form of bias
Yes.
at the corporate level.
Yes.
And naturally, you will have a diverse workforce.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, and that naturally brings me into the next conversation, because the next question I'm going to be asking is going to be talking about sustainability,
Yes.
business sustainability.
Yes.
Sustainability is understanding that our actions today impact the ability of future generations to make their own needs.
Yes.
And as such, when people talk about sustainable strategies, they try to infuse the elements of environment, economy, and the society in a way such that these elements can be impacted positively.
Yes.
For long-term business sustainability, do you see a relationship between diversity and inclusion and sustainability within the context that I just said? And if you do, how so? What are some of the ways that you have incorporated these principles in your corporate strategy?
There is indeed there is a connection and a relationship. It almost goes back to the discussion we've just had, which is the absence of primordial biases. And so when you have an organization that is happy and lucky to have full diversity and inclusiveness, what do you find? You are looking at an organization where there are people of diverse cultures. You are looking at an organization where you have young people, young, brilliant people have a voice. Just as much older people higher up in the organization have a voice. You are looking at an organization, as I said, where you have cultural interplay. In the Nigerian context, for instance, you are looking at an organization where there are people who the resources that make up your organization from across the ethnic groups in the country. What does that do for you? It means that you have a balanced contribution to your strategic planning. It means, for instance, that while the older generation might be looking at profitability as the biggest ingredient to sustainability, the younger ones are looking at other things like IT infrastructure, like environmental sustainability. And again, so what the diversity does for you is to take your strategic thinking away from a tunnel into a much broader spectrum where all views become important and are listened to. And in the end, you're going to have a much more balanced strategy, and the execution of that strategy will inevitably lead to sustainability.
So, I'm going to come down to gender.
Yes.
My next question on gender. Based on a report by McKinsey, women comprise only 15% of the oil and gas workforce.
Yes.
Now, in Nigeria, based on a report by the International Center for Investigative Reporting, in 2022, women only make up 18% of the workforce of the industry. This report also highlighted that of executive management appointments within the industry, only 25% were women. What do you think are the biggest barriers to achieving a more diverse participation at the C-suite? What are the enablers? And what practical solutions can organizations implement to foster an inclusive environment?
Those statistics demonstrate a history that we all seem not to pay attention to. We have to go back to history to understand why we are where we are now. And when you understand that history and understand today's realities, you will know that improvements that we're seeking are coming, even without necessarily doing too much. And I tell you what the history is. The management staff of the oil and gas industry, I would say as at 2010, 14 years ago, remember, consisted of people who were in the university 20 years earlier, which means 1990, in the 80s and so on. What was the demography at that time? So we are looking at geologists, petroleum engineers generally. So if you take away the support departments and consider the professional departments, which would be science and engineering, and maybe accounting and the legal profession and so on, the demography of those same disciplines in the universities 20, 30 years earlier was 90% male. In my time in the university, in the entire department of geology, I'm not talking about my class, in the entire department of geology, there was no female. In engineering those days, if you had 50 students across all the engineering departments, you'd be lucky to find 3. I'm not saying that was right, but that was reality. So 30 years later, you will not expect any miracle that will then transform the industry into a female-dominated area when the pipeline of the human resource that we're going to get to those levels was already 90% male. But all that is changing. In these same departments we're talking about today, you are having equal, in some cases, more female. In some geology departments, more female than male. I'm not saying we should wait another 30 years to see the evolution, but I'm just giving the historical background. And but all that is changing. As I gave you the example, we were doing graduate trainee today, we're getting in some departments, some cases more females than males, some cases equal male and female, even though we're doing it purely on merit. So it is the demography and the history. And so what do you do today? Yes, you try without compromising quality to balance this in because of the importance of diversity that were talked earlier. But my view is that it's a self-curing phenomenon, and we're already seeing it. If you check the same statistics, if you go back to the same statistics that you just gave for 2020, if you went back 10 years earlier, the statistics would be much worse. And if you go five years later, the statistics will be much better. You are beginning to see it, like I've seen in the banking sector, more female CEOs. It's also seeing it in oil and gas today. More females coming into the C-suites. Again, because we are now going further and further to the point where you're getting more and more educated females. So the simple, if you say what are the enablers, is education. Education. Unfortunately, there are still sections of this country where female education is a problem. As long as those portions of the country continue to refuse to educate females, they won't fall into the pipeline that will rise to C-suites 20 years from now. So the real enabler is simple education. Once you educate females and males, equally, they fall into the pipeline that will get to the C-suites in the next 20 years. So my simple answer for what are the enablers is education. Equal and unfettered access to education, whether you're male or female.
Final words. Because one of the things that we want to leave with is what not to do to ensure that businesses are sustainable and environment is inclusive. So what would you say to organizations and businesses not to do to ensure that they foster inclusive environment?
What not to do is to be guided by biases, and we do so without knowing it. No, seriously, we do so without knowing it. There are people who simply make up their minds that, how can I have a female petroleum engineer? Those are biases. There are people who simply say, you sit down in your management meeting and you think that women are a hindrance. There are people who actually believe that, why would I hire a woman who is still in childbearing age, and half the time I don't even find her in the office working? Those are biases. Unfortunately, those biases, a lot of times we do not even know that those biases exist. And then they guide the way we form our opinions about how. Once you're able to eliminate those biases and have an open mind, and that competent human beings are competent human beings, whether male or female, the difference will be wonderful for you. But and I'll emphasize this: those that have those biases don't know that they have them.
So what do we do? How do we making notes of that?
Well, so yeah, they themselves have to know that they're not doing their organization any good with those biases. It's the same thing. The very primordial biases of people who think that they must only hire from their family, or hire from their villages, or hire from their tribes. Those biases are there, but they don't know. You are not helping yourself if you think the only people you hire into your organization are people from your tribe. You're not. So that's the starting point. It's for people, you get to the point where you're building an institution, you should first of all educate yourself properly through this kind of enlightenment to know that inclusiveness and diversity work in your best interest. And so wipe away those biases so that diversity and inclusiveness will naturally come into the organization you're building. On a very serious note, the part of where I disagree with people who discuss diversity and inclusiveness is there's too much emphasis in trying to look right. I'm doing the right thing by saying, look, I go out to make sure 45% of my workforce are women. That's what people want to hear. And people say it whether they mean it or not. And when some of us argue that don't exclude the real things you're looking for, which is merit, when you're hiring, and that if you emphasize merit, there are enough women out there to meet your merit criteria and still meet your diversity criteria. But people don't want to listen to that. People want to hear people say, look, I go out of my way to make sure, and that's what people answer you generally. Oh yeah, my board, I have a 12-member board, I've made sure that 7 of them are women, which means you deliberately went to look for 7 women, not because you were looking for quality. Yes. You're welcome.